Welcome everybody to Mirror in the Stall. I am excited to be able to get to introduce you to Felicity George. How are you this morning? Oh wait, it's evening where you are, right?
Wet, but otherwise fine. It is, dark and stormy here. So yes, in Scotland.
Scotland. I love your accent.
Thank you. Hopefully you can all understand my accent.
Oh, definitely. So go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody, what you do,
Okay. Well, I'm Felicity. I have been working part-time with horses like a lot of people do, for 40 odd years. Went full-time about 11 years ago. And I guess I've had, in some ways, quite a typical journey, started with very much normal, if you like, traditional horse riding methods. Found they weren't working for problem horses. Went to alternative horsemanship, people like Ray Hunt, a lot of people you'd recognize in the States, I guess. Mark Rashid. Went off and trained with these guys, learned stuff from them. Still found it wasn't sitting quite right with me. Went off and did some behaviourist training, looking much more at the bigger picture. And as that went on, that didn't sit right with me either. It was very mechanical, a lot of it. It's very much, this is how the horse learns, this is what you do to the horse. And it was missing the feel and all the things that happen that are not at all mechanical. Right. So a couple of years ago, a group of us set up something called the Equine Behaviour Affiliation, and I think I'm finally fully comfortable with where I'm at just now. Much more looking at the ethology of the horse, looking at your stuff. The absolute central thing is stress. It's how do we help the horse feel better? Right. And pulling in a lot of ideas and frameworks from clinical psychology, from human psychology, appreciating that our brains are very, very similar to horses' brains. So we can apply the methods like trauma treatment methods that you would apply to people will be relevant to horses too. Frameworks for looking at problems. The things like Carl Rogers' ideas about empathy and unconditional positive regard, those kind of things, apply them to your horses too. So that's kind of where I'm at just now, is much more keep the horses happy. Keep stress. Stress is the biggest thing. If they're stressed, deal with it. Don't get on with your jumping lesson or your whatever you're doing or wanting to train them. Calm them down, and when they're calm and happy, they are so easy.
Right. Yeah, one of the biggest realizations that I had was that all these horses that would come in with behavioral issues and problems, I was like, well, it's just, I feel like the underlying thing is tension in their body, and tension in the body is just a story that they have that they're not safe. And I was like, so every single performance issue you're having is just starting with, how do we make them feel safe in whatever it is we're doing? And for some reason, a lot of, I think, traditional training don't see that deep into it, or it feels too feely or something. And so they avoid it. And I'm like, but that's what it is. I don't understand.
Yeah.
So what do you do specifically for people, for your clients?
We do an awful lot of, so we have a sort of structure, but it's very loose. We try not to get stuck in boxes or methods or anything. But our first thing would be what we would call establish physical and emotional safety for the client and for the horse. Right. So let's strip everything back until you both feel safe and comfortable with each other. And that might actually be protected contact. That might be working over a stable door. Right. Because I am scared this horse will bite me, and when I go in the stable, he's scared I'm going to hit him because, all that stuff's going
to bite me.
So, we start off with that. we do full checks on their physical and mental well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So they may have suffered trauma in the past, they may have issues like they're just not spending enough time with other horses. They don't feel safe and secure in their environment. They're not getting enough movement, they're not getting enough choice and control in their lives. So
Right.
all these things that impact on well-being, we try and do our best with the client practically to work out how we can get the basics as
Right.
best as possible for that horse, including physical issues.
Right.
Then looking at relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So how is the relationship with the client? How are they feeling about each other? Do they have trust? Absolutely nothing to do with dominance, I must say.
Right.
So it is really about trust, and it's about cooperation, synchrony, moving together, all that kind of stuff. How is that going? That's not going to work if either of them are really stressed, is it? Because
Right.
you think about yourself when you're stressed.
Right.
You're thinking about your own survival and your own well-being, and you're not, relationships tend to break a bit. So
Right.
then building relationship, and then we'd be looking at what would you like to do with your horse?
I see.
So training comes
So
quite
what
far
is
down
that?
the line.
Yeah. So what does that look like when you've identified for someone, or they've come to you and they say, I'm going to say this because I have, several clients that are experiencing this right now. And I know what I do, but I'm always interested in hearing what other people do so I can expand what I do. So say you have a client that comes to you and they have had their horses being aggressive with them, and their comfort level stops like at the stall door, like you'd said, like I don't want to go in because I'm scared and I feel like I need to defend myself, and my horse is feeling like it needs to defend itself against me because I feel safe. So what does that look like? Like, what do you do with those people?
I'll probably end up saying it depends an awful lot because it obviously depends what the person will become comfortable with and what the horse's issue is.
Right.
So is the horse, sometimes people think it's a general aggression when it's actually a very specific aggression. I bite when I see the saddle coming.
Right.
Possibly because of a physical reason. And you can change things and help the owner to see that the horse isn't going to bite in other circumstances and build the owner's confidence. A lot of the time I would start with some work over the stable door. Just probably with some positive reinforcement, some clicker training, something like that. Not always. It would depend how the owner would feel about it and whether the horse can be calm and okay about that.
Right.
But some positive interaction, some way with that individual and that horse of gaining some positive interactions. Quite often it might start with me going into the stable. If I think I can go in and usefully have some positive interactions with the horse, so is there anything touching, scratching that I can do that the horse will actually enjoy? And then the owner can build confidence through seeing me doing it.
Right.
And go, I could maybe have a try at that. In extreme cases, I have had a case recently where the owner was very frightened of the horse, and luckily she was at full livery, so other people could look after the horse, and really said at this stage, other people were absolutely fine with the horse. So saying at this stage, don't feel like you need to take him in and out the field.
Right.
Because any interactions you have are likely to break things further.
Right.
And while we get his pain issues sorted out, it was pain issues in his case, while we help him feel better, you just interact with him over the stable door.
Right.
And he got better very, very quickly with her.
Oh, good.
Once she felt safe, he wanted to talk to her again. Is that giving some ideas? Is all a bit vague, maybe. I could give a very specific example, I guess. Very slightly different, but it was a horse who bucked his owner off very badly, out on a hack, and she was a very competent rider, and he'd started not wanting to ride out, and she'd been very competent about making him. And he ran backwards and she made him go forwards, and he tried to spin and she made him go forwards. And he eventually bucked her off and did her an awful lot of damage. She was in hospital for quite a while. She was so cross with him, and she was scared of him, and all sorts of bad stuff. He was not in the best mood with her either. So we had this really broken relationship. And what we started with was, could we just try a little experiment? And I brought out a little plastic cone, and I asked him to touch the cone over the stable door, and he touched the cone. I gave him a treat. And he learned really quickly not to go for my pockets, not to hassle for treats. I touch the cone, I get a treat. And she starts changing her attitude a bit. She goes, oh, he's clever.
Oh, I see.
And isn't he being cute? Isn't he lovely? And then I say, right, so let's just bring his bridle out and hold his bridle near the stable door. And he retreats to the back of the stable, and you can see muscle tremors. And she suddenly says, he's actually scared of riding, isn't he? Yeah. He's just as scared as you are. He is not being dominant. He's not being naughty. He's not, and that just highlighted for her very much how he was feeling.
Yeah.
So we said, how about we just work up to him being able to touch the bridle and get a treat? And they really enjoyed doing that. And they started doing that loose in the arena, and he would go away and eat some hay and come back and do a bit more. And then they worked on to lunging, then they worked on to riding, but just, she became very sensitive to the fact that he was worried.
Right.
And it just took that showing her something where he wasn't worried, what that looked like.
Right.
That she suddenly saw what a big difference there was.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting when you can help them find a spot where they can be deeply empathetic. Like, how is this horse feeling similar to a situation you've been in where you felt that way?
Yeah.
And then reminding them, like, that's what they're experiencing right now. And it's like, oh, because I do feel like every behavior that is displayed, whether it's aggression or pushiness or whatever it is, stems from a situation where they didn't feel safe, and then it wasn't addressed. Absolutely. So they had to get big enough, because I feel like for a lot of clients, they experience the same thing, right? Like, they get worried about something, and then their mind goes, I have to get bigger and I have to do it stronger. Which then the horse goes, okay, so do I. And everyone's scared, but it looks like aggressiveness, but everyone's actually scared underneath. Yeah. So I think that is that piece is so big when you can help them make that connection. I do have this thing where I tell people, I think that horses, I feel like horses are assigned to us. Like, I don't know if we dip into the woo a little bit, but I feel like there's almost this horses that bring these certain lessons for us specifically. I don't know how you feel. I don't know how you feel about that, but
they certainly tell you a lot about how you are, and they're very humbling. I'm wary of talking too much. I had a tiny little story of a horse that I wasn't there to treat. I was seeing another client's horse, and this 3-year-old warm blood was doing a wall of death around his stable. He was just, whoa. And there was a group of ladies standing sort of shrieking and, being alarmed. And I sort of just felt really sorry for him. And I went up and said, I'll go and see if I can do anything. I went into his stable. I was feeling full of empathy for him. And he settled right down. And everybody went, oh, she's a horse whisperer. Isn't she wonderful? Isn't this amazing? And I was a bit surprised, because I wasn't thinking about that at all. I was thinking about the horse. And then the really interesting thing was, a week or so later, I went back, same horse, same problem. And I went into the stable with a bit of ego, thinking, I will fix this horse, I'll calm him down. And he just killed me. He really pointed out that I was not there for him on that occasion. My feel must have been very different. And I was really ashamed of myself afterwards. But I thought, this was about 20 years ago, but I was a bit full of myself because people had said, and I've been, oh, I did something clever. And my attitude changed. I wasn't there to help the horse 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about how it looked as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the sort of thing you're
100%. Yeah. Yeah. My whole premise of the stuff that I do now is that it is mirror in the stall. And it's, my feeling is that relationships or people in your life or horses specifically, because I feel like sometimes people will do things if they know it's going to help their horse, even before they'll do it if they know they're going to help themselves.
Yes.
So having that, they're just seeing the horse's behavior or the relationships or the situations through the lens of their own perspective. So having that being reflected back to you, if you can see it in that way, then you can take the lessons that are being offered to you and grow from it, rather than go, okay, I'm going to sell this horse and
Yes.
and then get another one and then have the same things. Maybe they look a little like a different flavor, but the same issues are there, where it's the lack of trust and the safety, and then the behavioral issues, whatever it looks like for that horse, come up anyways. Which is what I felt like I dealt with earlier in my career, when I was like, I know that I'm going to help this horse, and then I'm going to hand it back, and who knows, who knows what happens after that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest pieces. It's the empathy and also the unconditional positive regard of I am 100% on this horse's side. I'm with him. He might be doing something I don't like at this moment, like trying to bite me or bucking or whatever he's doing. I might not like that particular behavior, but I'm still 100% on his side.
Right.
I'm there to help him stop feeling bad and stop feeling like he needs to do that stuff. Rather than, we quite often, when scary stuff starts happening, we disconnect and say, I want to make him stop doing that. Right. And then you've lost it. It needs to be, I would want to help him stop doing it.
So for the people side of it, do you ever focus on the language that they use?
Yeah.
So what does that look like? How do you specifically like draw awareness to that?
I probably quite a lot of modeling, if you like, that I'll just talk the way that I describe things, and I'll say, oh, you can see how worried he was by that. How do you think he's actually feeling just now? You know, just what do we mean? You know, we all use words like evasive and stubborn, but what do we actually mean by them? What do we think is going on underneath? And just dig into it a little bit. I'm not a person psychologist, so I wouldn't say that was my expertise, but
I just know it's been stuff that's been coming up, and something I've looked a little bit more at, like, did you hear what you just said? Like, is that not really true? And it's like, oh, well, no, probably not. It's like the importance of, I think, how the words we use affect the way we feel, and then the way we feel to them is such a significant thing and big. And for you specifically, so do you own horses, or how did you get into the horse side of it? Has it?
I worked as a riding instructor in my 20s, and then I worked at a horse rescue place, and then I worked at a dressage yard. And along the way, I guess in my 20s, I started kind of rescuing horses who nobody else wanted. And I got a good collection of them. And the idea was to rehome them so I could do that again. But of course, none of them ever left. I now have, my longest staying member is Paddy, who's a Connemara Thoroughbred Cross, and he's now 38.
Oh my goodness.
So he's doing, and I got him at 17, and the vet said I would put him to sleep now because he's not going to last more than a few months.
Right.
So that was 21 years ago. He's, he came to me with arthritis, with cancer, with having had laminitis, not looking like the best health. And he has thrived. He's doing great. Still going strong at 38. And then I've got a couple of other strange animals. And I look after a couple of other people's as well. So I've got 5. Just
So I'm interested in your, what is his name, the 38-year-old?
Paddy, Paddington Bear is his full name.
For him, why is it, do you think, that he was able to thrive with you versus if he had been given to someone else?
I think there's a lot. So we talk a lot about the biopsychosocial model and thinking about that whole picture. He had, as far as I know, a brilliant start in life.
Mm-hmm.
So he was bred in the hills. He lived in the hills with his family. He was a breeding stallion for a while. He had a lot of freedom, has a very good cognitive process, very, very sharp.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a really good start in life, which I think set him up very well. He then, because he was a horse of strong opinions and strong character, and he was very pretty, he went to a less experienced person and they had trouble with him and they put more and more severe bits in his mouth. They used more and more punishment. He ended up throwing off everybody who came anywhere near him and attacking people and was about to be destroyed for dangerous behaviour. And he was also stable 24/7. So for about 3 years before I got him, he'd been stabled all the time. And I think he was quite traumatized and very angry with the world. But because he'd had such a good start, once he went back into herd and once I managed to get over to him, which took a while, that I wasn't going to ask him anything unreasonable. His physical health just got better and better, along with his mental health. Right. So I think he had the setup, if you like, the genetics, the early brain development to be able to recover from the bad stuff very, very well. Whereas others, you know, if they have a poor start, maybe they're going to be a bit vulnerable all their lives and a bit more. Paddy is exceptionally robust now.
Right. So when you started off with a term, so I wanted to make sure everyone was clear on what that term meant. What did you say?
Biopsychosocial. So this is what I use with the students an awful lot. I also teach courses in equine behaviour. Biology, psychology, social being relationships and environment. And just to think that anything your horse does will be impacted by his biology, his psychology, and the environment.
Got it.
Rather than going, there's one reason, or it's that whole thing playing together all the time, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
All the past experiences, where they're at now, where you're at now, what environment they're in, everything that's going on is all having an effect.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you do? So you go and you work with horses and their people like one-on-one, and you said you were teaching courses. What does that look like?
So teaching the courses just now, because of COVID, I'm doing all that over Zoom, which is a little bit harder. But we basically have a couple of courses. We have an applied behaviour course, which is for anyone with a horse, which would just give you all this understanding physical and mental well-being, understanding relationships, understanding ways you can train and communicate with a horse, all these kind of things, and in a very applied way. And then we have a professional behaviour course, Behaviourist course. So that's for people who want to go and work with clients, because obviously there is a huge extra. It's all very well being good at dealing with a horse, being good at dealing with a client is a whole other ball game. So yes, a good bit of extra training there and some mentoring, just having them come out with us on visits and observe, and then start to take over a little bit and learn how to work with people. And I think really importantly, I guess, be interested to see what you think with this, but it's learning to really like your clients. That sounds really silly, but when you see horses in a bad way, you can get into this thing of, oh, these owners, I just wish. And again, you've got to go in with that, I'm there to help the client, and you're on their side with that positive attitude to the people of, I will help them to change.
Right.
And
I always tell people, I tell people, I think what happens is that a lot of even horse trainers or animal people are that way because possibly don't experience how to connect with other people in a healthy way from the beginning.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you go to animals. So
Yeah.
that was definitely me up until maybe 4 years ago, when it was always about, I just said this to someone yesterday. I was like, I didn't actually care about the people at all. I was like,
Yes, absolutely.
People are screwing these horses up, and I'm here to help the horse, and I feel bad for the horse, and that's what I'm doing. The people are just, and I had this really shit attitude about people, because that, it was just, and so for me, it was like, of course I couldn't help the people, get on board with their horse, because I there was an underlying something about me that just didn't care about the people. And I don't know, it was because there was that big chunk of me that had to heal first for me to be able to go, I actually really like people now. Like, this is a new thing for me.
Yeah. It's one of the things I wonder about, because I didn't really notice the process, because I was very much like that, and people were kind of the barrier. If I could just get rid of this person between me and the horse, it would be great.
All the horses, give me all the horses.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think a lot of us who work with animals, that's partly why we do it. The thing that I'm not quite sure about is what happened to change my attitude so much. Because these days I really, really like working with the owners, and I like the people, but I don't know quite how that changed. And I suspect the way it changes for different people is different.
Right.
So
I'm like, what is it? I'm interested. I think you should look into that. Yeah, I know mine was specifically, I went through a really kind of gnarly divorce, and my own horses started to become affected. And I feel like now this is like a week fresh of stuff I'm looking at, where I'm going, they were still holding on. Even I think I've had them both, two of them, since they were babies. And so I'm like, if there's something wrong with these horses, it's definitely my fault. So I've actually had some really big, profound, even this morning, actually driving, I was like, oh my gosh. But it's that, my own horses started to have anxiety, and they started to hold tension, and I was like, like, these are my horses. I fix horses. Like, what? Excuse me. So I think that's why it resonates with me when I know people will do things to help their horses before they'll do it to help themselves. And I just got into such a bad place that I started just diving into unknowingly, because I didn't even know what that would mean to help heal yourself. That was something that was so off my radar. Like, I'd been to therapy and stuff before, so I was like, yeah, it's like a thing people do. They like, I didn't understand at the level that I understand now. And I think it took going through that and unlayering and uncovering, where I was like, being able to connect deeper with myself allowed me to go, oh, I can connect with other people too now. So it shifted that. But I think that that's a huge thing for a lot of horse trainers. They're very resentful of their clients, and it causes them to treat them really poorly.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
and then I see these relationships that are so toxic, and and I have a lot of clients that have actual trainers, so I'm like the side trainer. And I just remind them, like, how does your trainer make you feel? Because it's probably how your horse feels, and if you're down with that, then okay, but like, think about that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I find works for some of my students is to say, practice the empathy, the unconditional positive regard, the being genuine with horses until you get really, really good at it, and then transfer it onto people that you do like.
Right.
And then try people that you generally have a harder time with, to kind of work your way up. And that does actually work quite often.
That's
and
good.
people kind of, if you practice it all the time, you get better at it. And I think maybe, I don't know if you would feel this at all, but I think one of the things that changed for me was probably feeling that I actually could help. Because when you get trapped in a situation where you could help the horse, but you're not good at dealing with the person, then you don't resolve things.
Right.
And then you end up very frustrated and needing somewhere to put that blame.
Right.
As you get better at dealing with the people, then you get more effective at helping the horses, and that makes you like the people more. And it becomes kind of a positive circle, if you like.
Yeah, I feel like then it kind of expands, because I think for me, what I ended up experiencing was I put myself in enough situations where people were so loving to me and knew how to connect, that I got to feel what that actually felt like.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I could do that for other people too. Like, it's so I hold these sessions that we call the mirror sessions. And it's, at one point I was certified in EGALA, and that model has, the mental health specialist and then a horse specialist, and then you facilitate, and I worked with a psychologist, and we did a lot of different things. It was really heavy work for me when we did a lot of foster kids, and it just was just like, this is so sad. It's just a lot.
Yeah.
And I would always go, I think there's something different. Like, there's something I want to do, but I know I can't operate underneath that model, but that model was really helpful to create that. And doing their mirror sessions, and we have a group of people that come, and we just do a meditation, and they're my horses that I use, or I have a couple client horses that I use that are good for it too. And I a couple of horses that I would be able to throw into the mix that were training horses that were so shut down, because every time they had been around a person, requests were being made, and so they didn't even want to be around people. And then I really resonated with me, because I felt like, I didn't want to do with people either. And so it was interesting having those horses in those sessions has created so much healing for them, because they just get to be around people, and they can go away if they want, they can come closer if they want, nobody's, and then I looked at it, one of my clients said, I conducted a training, I got to be you. So I got to facilitate it, and it felt so good. And I was like, I'm doing this for you guys, but it feels really good to be able to do it for me too. So it's both ends kind of get that, you get the benefits from it, just by being able to do both sides. So I think that's kind of how it expanded for me. Feels that feels like the same, right? Is that circle where it just keeps growing and growing and expanding. Really good. So as of right now, do you have anything that's active that you're doing that people, if they're watching, if they wanted to participate, or
Well, I would say probably the biggest thing would be that people can join the Equine Behaviour Affiliation. We have 4 webinars a year. It's £25 a year to join, and we talk about, what did we talk about last year? We talked about a model of the brain, which is very, very simple, and I find works really well with clients, which is view the brain as an owl, which is your stop and think, an elephant, which is your memory, and a meerkat.
Oh, interesting.
And the focus was on calming the meerkat. So, So
I love that, and I love that visual that you get when you think of those 3 things.
And it's very simple, and you can teach people to spot the horse's meerkat getting alert very easily. And then how do we calm this meerkat? So we did a session on that. We did a session on weight management and after control. We did a session which I ran called 3 Horses Who Spooked and Spun, which was basically exactly the same behaviour in 3 horses for very different reasons. And we did a session on trauma treatment. So that would be a typical range of the kind of stuff that we do. Not it's 4 sessions in a year, but it's a nice, we try and keep them interesting. So,
that sounds interesting to me. I was like, I like all of that. Is there, I'm going to check in if anyone has any questions, throw it in the chat box or raise your hand, and then we'll let you guys chat. We're coming towards the end, and I want to make sure that we save time. If anyone does have questions, then you get a chance to ask. So in speaking about the work that you do and facilitating and holding space for people, Is there something that you do for yourself specifically to keep yourself in a place where you can do that? Because I feel like that's a huge thing.
I suspect what happens just now is one of the horses I look after is an ex-race horse who belongs to a lady called Mary Holmes, who is part of our organisation as well, and she's a clinical psychologist. So she comes to visit Harvey regularly. And probably I do a lot of, I get free therapy.
Perfect.
I think having people to talk to about it.
Definitely.
Who are listening to you.
Right.
Is probably my way of,
yeah, I think that I stress that so much for people, and I think part of why I have this group and then why I share so much, because I have clients that that are like, well, it just comes natural to you. This just come natural to you, and I have to work harder at this. And I'm like, do you like understand the amount of commitment that I've made to work my own stuff out every day? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to feel like something that comes natural to you. And that's what I really want people to understand. Like, it is not. I may have been born with the passion to be around the horses, but the self-care piece, what are you doing to hold that? What I think people need to know that is an ongoing thing.
And I guess there's cultural differences, but certainly be true in Scotland that you're absolutely not brought up to do that. You're brought up to get on with it and not make a fuss. You know, so looking after yourself is not something you learn about.
And they don't teach that to you in school.
No.
And I don't think our parents or their parents taught them, and so we never, it's like, so I think the horses, I think people reach for them because they make them feel better, and once they stop making them feel better, then they're like, oh no, now what?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So is there anything else that you feel like you want to say that came up for you during this talk that you can feel complete? I always like to check in.
Oh, no, I think that's been good. Yeah, I always feel like I'm a little bit vague when we ask about particular questions, like an aggressive horse.
Right.
And I think it's because of this biopsychosocial thing that is so individual, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every horse and every horse owner combination is a different story. So
and I think what the main thing, though, the underlying theme for me and for you, and probably I'm just reaching for more people that do this work in any way, like body work or just any, I think the three things that you mentioned, that triangle of things that whatever someone is specializing in, any of those three things, even, what do you do? And, what does that look like for you? But it all kind of feels like it boils down to how you can find the connection between you and that partner that's going through that thing. And then in that, you find that empathy.
Yes.
I think that is what unravels all of it for people.
It's one of the things I found very interesting early on. I didn't really understand it, was when I started working with clients and I'd get them to be looking at the horse's body language and when does the horse feel worried. And repeatedly clients would come back to me and say, I'm really trying to listen to my horse, but I don't really understand, but she's getting much better. So actually just listening. Even if you don't really understand what's going on, just listening is really powerful. So it's all those little things that come up along the way.
I think that's huge too, because people think they have to have the answers. And you don't. You just, I think even when I have clients come in, I don't know the answer, but I can just sit and kind of hold that space and pay attention to what they're saying and sit with them in it. I think that's what people can do for their horses. And I think that it creates that same like relief, almost like, oh, somebody is finally paying attention. Even if you don't know, or if they're paying attention, you can hear me.
I don't know, but I do care about how you feel. Even if I don't totally understand how you feel, and I can't, but I do, I do want to help. It does help.
That's huge. Well, thank you so much. That was such a fun conversation.
Thank you.
if people do want to learn more about you and your programs and what you do, where can they find you?
Shall I type into the chat box where the...
Definitely.
You can email.
And then I will also, I will put it in the link of the show notes so that it's easy for them to just click on and find. But yes, I like people to be able to follow up and find you.
So that is the main email address. I guess I'll put the website in as well.
Perfect.
And also find us on Facebook.
Oh, Facebook as well. Yeah. So I will stick all of the links to that stuff in the note for the call. And then that way, if anyone wants to reach out and learn more about what you guys do, then they definitely can. Well, thank you so much. That was so much fun. I was really doing chat. I love finding other people that are on the same path and helping people.
It's nice. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.